Uh, my name is Garth Ratliff. I'm the Deputy Chair of the West Scotland Local History Group. I welcome you all to this Zoom session. I'm particularly looking forward to it because I know next to nothing about the Masons. I know a little bit about the de Havilland because as a schoolboy going to Riverton Grammar, I went past the de Havilland twice a day and knew quite a few people who worked there. Quite a number of my school colleagues had fathers who worked at the Horwich local works, but I never went near the local works. So I'm looking forward to hearing about those two establishments. Okay, Eddie, over to you and welcome. Looking forward to the talk.
First of all, thank you for inviting me to deliver this lecture. I first delivered this paper to a Masonic lodge in Horwich in 2015 at the request of my friend Alex Prescott, who's here tonight with his wife Linda. Alex has again asked me to deliver this paper, this time to your local history group. As many of you may not be Freemasons, let me first dispel a few myths about Freemasonry. But before we do that, I've got an old picture from round about 1890 of Horwich and Lee Lane, which was the main road of the bowling green. And you can see horse-drawn carriages and people outside the pub, etc. So, dispelling myths. There are no secrets in Freemasonry, and at the end of this talk, I will be happy to answer any questions you want. No questions are off limits. Freemason is a private but not secret fraternal organization that welcomes individuals from all walks of life to become members, and both men and women can join, but they have separate organizations. There is a requirement that members believe in God, value friendship, honesty, fairness, and charitable causes. And the Freemasons of England is the second largest giver of money to charitable good causes after the National Lottery. That's my advertisement over. This paper is aimed at a light-hearted look at a group of Freemasons in Horwich and the surrounding areas who had recently formed a Masonic lodge and then decided to have a day out with their wives, partners and friends for a picnic in 1890 at Lord Lathom's Mansion House and Deer Park near Ormskirk. I think it was somewhere between Parbold and Ormskirk, Lathom House, but it's no longer there. My title, The Annual Picnic, could have easily have been called The Railways Are Coming. That was a frequent phrase used in the UK in the middle of the 19th century. However, for Horwich, the railway works came to the town in 1886. Horwich went from being a small village in 1880 to a bustling town in 1900, with trams running down the main street and a rapidly expanded population. Here on the left, we have a picture of what looks like a wheelwright's shed, typical of an old village. And on the right, Lee Lane with the tram track running down the middle, and the trams ran from Bolton to Horwich in 1900. Let's go back a bit and I'll explain my interest in Horwich. I started work at British Aerospace in 1974, back in the days when Edward Heath was Prime Minister and the country was struggling with the compulsory 3-day week due to the miners' strike and power shortages. As many of you will know, British Aerospace came to Horwich back in 1937 when it was known as de Havilland. It had been attracted to the area as there was a wealth of engineering talent available from the loco works. De Havilland and the loco works went on to play major roles during the Second World War, the former changing its name to Hawker Siddeley and then British Aerospace. Here's a couple of old pictures. The Bridge Inn on the left, that's a very old picture of it. And on the right, Ridgemont House, where the Freemasons started really off at the Bridge Inn and moved to Ridgemont House. I became a Freemason in 1975. Shortly after this, I visited and joined a lodge in Horwich, which met at the Bridge Hotel, and then the lodge moved to Ridgemont House. I also joined a lodge in West Horton, so not far from where you're based. Horwich went from a sleepy village to a hive of industry. And I put a picture of the Crown Hotel circa 1890 on the left-hand side. I think it still looks very much like that today at the end of Horwich. And that was home of the Masonic Lodge from 1891 to 1893. And then I put a picture, an aerial view of the local works on the right, and it was a 350-acre site. It was absolutely massive. The Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway Company purchased the large piece of land in Horwich in 1884 for the local works to enable them to build trains and spare parts for trains. The population of Horwich expanded rapidly. It increased from just under 4,000 in 1881 to nearly 13,000 in 1891 in just 10 years. Now, this is where they went for the picnic, and it looks totally different than a small little industrial town. This watercolor of Glassimo Liani's, he designed Lathom House, and Sir Humphrey Repton, the landscape architect, he designed the deer park. And this is taken from his book of 1792. The estate covered an area of 44,000 acres, which is absolutely massive. Repton was the landscape architect of the deer park, and it's sadly no longer with us. So why did the local works pick Horwich? The local works was in Horwich because the railway company needed reliable trains with interchangeable parts, and Horwich had the local skilled workforce from the textile and bleaching industry to make it happen. The local works drew workers not just from the successful textile and bleaching works in Horwich, but also drew workers from near and far. Those workers who were Freemasons and who took up residence in Horwich naturally wanted a Masonic lodge in their new town. A request was made from a group of Freemasons to form a lodge in Horwich. The rulers of both East and West Lancashire Masons met and decided that the new lodge would be placed in West Lancashire group of lodges. Quite speedily, the lodge was consecrated, which took place on Wednesday, the 13th of November, 1889. And I put a picture there of Lord Lathom. He's very characteristic of his big beard. He was the provincial Grand Master of West Lancashire and would normally have conducted the consecration ceremony. But Lord Lathom was on the charitable committee in London, which met on the day of the consecration. So he didn't conduct the ceremony, the provincial secretary did. So quite speedily, the lodge was consecrated, and it was the 13th of November, 1889. This was the same year that the first loco engine rolled out of the sheds at Horwich. And there's a picture of the Wren, which was typically used for quite a long time. And that was the first train out of Horwich Loco Works. The consecration was held at the public hall in Lee Lane, which had recently been built. There's another picture of the Wren with the Loco Works in the background, and a picture of a little plaque outside the public hall where they had the consecration meeting. A couple more pictures of the Loco Works, the Wren with the Loco Works in the background, and I've worked in plenty of foundries, and that's a picture of the foundry in Horwich Loco Works. So there's the aerial view again. It covered the site, 350 acres. And for a small village, this is far bigger than the whole village itself. So it had a massive impact on the area. The first master of Horwich Lodge was John Rogers, who came from a Masonic lodge in Strangeways, Manchester. That's not the jail, but near it. The first senior warden was Dr. George Henry Whitaker, the Horwich physician, who came from a Masonic lodge in Bolton. Dr. Whitaker was also a member of a Masonic lodge in St. Anne's-on-Sea. It seems strange that he was a member of two lodges. I assume he was probably born at St. Anne's and stayed a member where he was born, and he probably worked at Horwich, and the nearest lodge was in Bolton. The junior warden was Hawthorne R. Thornton, who came from a Masonic lodge in London. So he travelled a long way up. Both the lodge master and the junior warden were engineers. And I put a picture there, which is circa 1890, of what a master of a lodge would look like in his regalia. He's got a collar with a square on, hanging from the collar, and an apron with a couple of tassels on the front. And they were normally white aprons. Nowadays, they would be rimmed with blue. The members who helped form this new Masonic lodge came from established lodges in Burnley, Chorley, Preston, Whittley Woods, Chowbend, Lee, Manchester, London, St. Anne's-on-Sea, and Egremont in Cheshire. Such was the attraction of this new railway town and this new Masonic lodge. At this particular time, there were no Masonic lodges in West Horton. And I put a picture there on the right of the 17th Earl of Derby. He was the MP for South East Lancashire, West Horton Division, and he became a member of this Horwich Lodge, a very influential member of the lodge. A little bit about Lord Derby. Start off, he was Edward George Villiers Stanley, 17th Earl of Derby, styled Mr. Edward Stanley until 1886, then the Honourable Edward Stanley, and then Lord Stanley, and his profession was down as a politician and a British soldier. He was a conservative diplomat, and he was also a racehorse owner. He was twice the Secretary of State for War and also served as the ambassador to France. He was president of the Historic Society for Lancashire and Cheshire from 1908 to 1936. He died at Knowsley Hall in 1948, the year I was born. Lord Derby presided over the Masonic province of East Lancashire for 39 years until 1948, during which time the number of lodges increased from 113 to 303, and the number of members increased from nearly 5,000 to 19,000. Lord Derby was also the Lord Lieutenant of Lancashire from 1928 till 1948. Recruitment to the lodge was high. The minutes from the February 1890, when the lodge met at the Railway Hotel, states that there were 50 new members that were going through ceremonies that evening on their way to becoming Master Masons. And that's a tremendous amount of work. This would have been a very long process to be done on one evening. And the Master, John Rogers, was assisted by one of the founding past masters, Dr. Farnham, who, like Dr. Whitaker, were both surgeons. The finale of Brother Rogers' year as master was the lodge, was to have the first lodge's annual picnic, and is to be held on the 10th of June, 1890. The picnic was for members, ladies and friends. On the morning of the picnic, the lodge was first opened, and once the business of the lodge was concluded, a beautiful illuminated and framed address in vellum was presented to the local physician, Dr. Whitaker, the senior warden. And it read, "We, your brethren of the number 2324 lodge, desire to express to you our warmest congratulations on this occasion of your marriage. As a brother Mason, your hand has ever been ready to assist those kind of offers for which the craft is distinguished. And this gives us every confidence in the hope that the union with your bride, to whom we beg to tender our most cordial congratulations, your future life will be one of increased happiness and usefulness. We pray that the great architect of the universe may bless you and your beloved wife with health, happiness, and long and prosperous life. And it was signed by all of the brethren. The picnic follows. The picnic was held at Lathom House, the seat of the Right Honourable the Earl of Lathom. He was the Deputy Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England, almost the highest position you could have in the country, and he was the Provincial Grand Master for the province of West Lancashire. And there is a picture of Lathom Mansion House and Deer Park. It was completed in 1740, and the main block was demolished in 1925. But it was a magnificent building. And there's the mansion house in its heyday. And you can see sitting on the balcony with the beard on the left, Lord Lathom, and the lady in black with a kind of funny dress which sticks out at the back. That was his wife. And they partied a lot, and I think that was a lot of people who were attending one of his many parties. The building was designed by Giacomo Leone, the famous Venetian architect, and that was the plan of the house. Now, Lord Edward Bootle Wilbraham was actually titled the Earl of Lathom, and special permission for the picnic had first been gained from his wife, Lady Alice Lathom, to visit the house and grounds of Lord Lathom's family seat. Sadly, Lady Alice, Countess of Lathom, died in a carriage accident on the estate in 1897, aged 65. Lord Lathom died the following year, aged just 60. The carriage accident was Lady Alice had 4 of her friends, all ladies as well, and they'd been hunting, and they came back, and as they went over a ford on the entrance of the estate, the carriage turned over and she got stuck under the carriage and the water, and obviously she died. So the Lancashire Masonic hierarchy, 4 distinguished Freemasons, peers and politicians were very active during this period of the late 1800s, early 1900s. They were the first Earl of Lathom, the 16th and 17th Earls of Derby, and the 26th Earl of Crawford. During this period, these 4 noble Masons were not only good friends, but also related to each other in one way or another, and they were frequent visitors to each other's houses, Lathom Mansion House, Knowsley Hall, and Hay Hall. Lord Lathom was a successful politician and well known to His Royal Highness Albert Edward, Prince of Wales, later King George VII, who personally appointed him his Deputy Grand Master in 1875. He then promoted him to the next highest position as Programme Master in 1891, a position he held until his death in 1898. That meant basically he ran the Freemasons of England, because the Prince Regent didn't actually get too involved with the day-to-day running of the Masonic lodges. His Royal Highness Albert Prince Edward of Wales was elected Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England in 1874, and he served until his succession to the throne in 1901, when he became the protector of the craft. And that's him on the left in all his regalia. So back to Lord Lathom. At the time of the Horwich Lodge picnic, Lord Lathom was Baron of Skemersdale and Chamberlain of Queen Victoria's household. Lord Lathom had already held several important posts, such as Conservative Party Chief Whip in the House of Lords, Captain of the Yeomen of the Guards, and a member of the Privy Council. He was also appointed Knight of the Grand Cross of the Order of the Bath. He was also appointed Honorary Colonel of the 11th/1st Preston Lancashire Rifles Corps in 1872. I mentioned before he died when he was 60, a year after his wife. Who knows if he'd lived whether he would have become the Grand Master when the Prince of Wales resigned to take up the throne. We'll never know. I put a little bit from Google Maps just to show you where Lathom House was. You can see Horwich on there on the right, and it's about 20 miles to Lathom House through Parbold and over the top, and it's between Parbold and Ormskirk. And in a car today, it would take 54 minutes. So you can imagine in a wagonette, which is a large stagecoach, which can seat 20 people, it'd probably take at least 2 hours traveling at about 12 miles an hour. This is a picture of Giacomo Leone, the famous Venetian architect. Lathom House was rebuilt between 1725 and 1740 on a site of previous houses dating back to Norman times. The house was designed by Giacomo Leone, the famous Venetian architect, who built what was described as the finest Palladium house in the whole country. And it certainly looked good at the time. Lathom House Deer Park, its deer park was designed and landscaped by Sir Humphrey Repton, who followed on from Capability Brown as the greatest English landscape architect of the day. The grounds and deer park boasted the Lines, which was a 2.5 mile long line of trees, and the grandest in the 17th century, the longest tree line avenue in all of England. There was also a temple, a new hunting lodge, and a Gothic dairy. The house front of the mansion was 156 feet wide, and it was surrounded by parkland of 2.5 miles in circumference. And there's a picture of Sir Humphrey Repton, landscape architect. He also designed Hatton Park, which many of you might be familiar with, as well as the deer park at Lathom House. Freemasonry. Whilst Edward Bootle Wilbraham was a student at Christ Church, Oxford, he was initiated into a university Masonic lodge and became an active Freemason until his death. So picture of Christ Church, Oxford, and a picture of Lord Lathom in his Masonic regalia. Following the opening and closing of the lodge at 9:30, the picnic party of about 40, including ladies, made their way to 2 awaiting horse-drawn wagonettes to drive the 20-mile to Lord Lathom's mansion house and deer park. And at that time, the average speed for a stagecoach was about 12 miles an hour. On arriving at Lathom House, lunch was provided by a brother from Mr. Taylor of Ormskirk, to which ample justice was done. The party afterwards visited the house and the grounds under the watchful eye of the head gardener, Benjamin Ashton. The magnificence of the house and garden was both a surprise and a treat to all the members of the party. And here on the right, we have a picture of the servants and staff of Lathom House at the time. The gardeners are on the back row, and the kitchen staff and the estate staff are on the front. The Wheat Street Sheaf Hotel at Ormskirk, where they went for their evening meal, is no longer there. The party made the way to the Wheat Sheaf at Ormskirk, where they had a splendid evening meal. Numerous toasts were to be had, including one to from Dr. Whitaker, who thanked the brethren for the address that was made early in the morning. The worshipful master was thanked for arranging the picnic, after which several of the party visited the ancient church at Ormskirk. This is a picture on the right of where Ormskirk Hall was, and next to Ormskirk Hall was the Wheatsheaf Hotel. They both got demolished and is now called Wheatsheaf Walk, but that's the only picture I could find. The ancient church in Ormskirk, the 12th century parish church of St. Peter and Paul, well worth a visit. The clock tower was built in 1536 to hold the bells from Berscoe Abbey, following the disillusionment of monasteries under the Act of 1536. The church is one of only 3 churches in England to have both a tower and a spire. The return home. The weather was not altogether favourable, but the outing was thoroughly enjoyed and all arrived home safely. Let's hope that they had covers on the wagonettes. They may not have done. Brother Rogers, the first master of Horwich Lodge, certainly set the bar high for any following master who wished to have another picnic. I have a small addendum. The next picnic was actually on Wednesday, the 12th of August, 1896. This time they went to Skipton and Bolton Abbey. I don't live that far from Skipton, and you can see Bolton Abbey on the left, which isn't much different to today. And on the right, top one is Market Day at Skipton, when they used to sell cows and cattle there. And on the bottom, Skipton on a quiet day. I have a list of petitioners to the lodge, and they're all up there, but I can tell you roughly what they were. There was 1 joiner, 2 builders, a hairdresser, 2 surgeons, a chemist and druggist, a hotel keeper, a foundry worker, 4 engineers, 2 foremen, 2 clerks of works, and a borough official. They also had a list of 8 people who weren't Freemasons who had applied to join the lodge, which were read out on their first night, and they had a whole list of people who were Freemasons that also wanted to join, but they couldn't join on the day of the consecration. Thanks for listening. That's my talk virtually over. If you've enjoyed my presentation, my name's Eddie Forkgen, and it's pronounced Forkgen, as in 4 gin and tonics. If you didn't like my presentation, my name's Alex Prescott. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. That's me back in the land of the living.
You'll need to unmute yourself if you want to ask questions. The simplest way to do that, if you've got a laptop, is just to press the space bar while you're talking, and then you can let it go at the end.
Do I say share? No, that's not it, is it?
No, you don't need to. No, leave it, Ed. Just leave it now. That's fine. Can I start off the questions?
You can, Alex.
The church at Ormskirk, I've actually wondered about this ever since I was a young man, which was quite a few years ago now. On the Ordnance Survey map, does it show it as a spire or as a tower?
Well, to be correct, it should be a circle and a square, shouldn't it, with a cross on top?
Circle and square, cross on top.
Well, if it's got a tower, it should be a square with a cross on top. If it's got a spire, it's a circle with a cross on top. But it's got both, so it should really have both on.
Yeah, I just wondered whether you might know.
But I don't have an Ordnance Survey map of Ormskirk. But it is a very nice church and worth going and having a look at.
It certainly is.
And it reminds us of that sinful act of all the monasteries that were knocked down and devastated throughout the country.
Can I ask, in what sense Freemasonry is a craft? Is that a metaphor, or what does it stand for, the word craft?
Sorry, what does what stand for? Freemasonry?
Craft. the word craft in Freemasonry, you used it yourself. You talked about the craft. And I wondered, yeah, C-R-A-F-T.
I was saying that was their profession, a clerk. No,
No, not the clerk, the craft.
Eddie,
The craft.
Eddie, what I think the questioner is getting at is that you described Freemasonry as the craft.
the craft.
Yeah, and that of course relates back to one of the so-called origins of Freemasonry, which was actually as an operative mason, and so the craft was masonry, forming blocks of stone into buildings.
Yeah, I'll just take that a little bit further. Before the Great Fire of London, Masonic lodges were basically stonemasons lodges, and they worked the ceremonies of people joining to be an apprentice stonemaker, and when they were fully skilled, there'd be a fellow of the craft, a fellow craft, and so after the Great Fire of London, there's a tremendous amount of money poured into London to rebuild the centre of London, and a lot of the people who had lots of money were invited to join the lodges as speculative masons as opposed to operative masons, and that is where we refer to the craft. And thank you for putting that screen back on. I didn't know how to do it. So Freemasonry actually uses stonemason symbols to moralize the things they believe in. And the things they believe in are all the kind of things most Christians would want to believe in: fairness, believe in God, believe in charity, and they use the stonemason symbols to moralize over on their principles.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Eddie, when you talked at the beginning about the meeting when the I've forgotten the word, when the lodge was inaugurated, there were, I think, 10 people from other lodges who took part, and they've got various titles like senior warden and junior warden and so on. And I must admit that's quite confusing, because I can't relate them to either the importance of each other or to the role they played. So would you like to expand on that?
I'll explain that. I can't see you all, but I would have asked you how many of you are Christians, or how many are Muslims or Jews or Roman Catholics, Anglicans or Methodists. But I'll assume a lot of you are Christians. In Christian churches, you have a priest or a vicar, and you have wardens. The wardens tend to do the paperwork and the organization to support the vicar or priest. And in a Masonic lodge, you have a worshipful master, who is the person in charge for that year or for several years. And so you have the worshipful master who's in charge, and he has to be elected, just like the members. And the second in charge is the senior warden, and the third in charge is the junior warden. Does that answer your question?
Okay, I can see that. That's similar.
And progressively, the year after the person who's the master, the senior warden would then take that job over the next year, and the junior warden would go up a notch.
That's very parallel to the way it's done in Rotary, where you've got a president and then 2 vice presidents, a senior and a junior vice president, who go through the same progression.
Yeah, and same in the golf club. Yeah, you've got hierarchy, or at school you'll have a headmaster, deputy head, or something like that. And I actually worked at British Aerospace by default. Before I went working at British Aerospace, I worked at Meccano in Liverpool, where they made Meccano sets and dinky toys. And I got a job as a draftsman at Metal Box. And at that time, I'd moved to Lee. And I'd give my notice, and I finished my job at Meccano on the Friday night. And I was due to start at Metal Box as a draftsman on the Monday morning. And on the Saturday morning, I got a telegram. They had telegrams in them days, and it said, "Don't come." the chairman of Metal Box had decided, because of the 3-day week in England, he froze all recruitment. So in all the Metal Box factories in the UK, there was no recruitment. So there, I'd left one job, I'd no job. I had a mortgage to pay in Lee. So I walked round to British Aerospace and said, can I have a job? And they gave me a job.
There you go.
Can I just say, my mother worked at Horwich Loco Works during the war, and her sister worked there as well. And my brother worked at British Aerospace, so you've got quite a family connection with Horwich and British Aerospace. Could I just ask you a question about the West Orton Masonic Lodge? Do you know when it was actually formed? And my interest is, I've recently I've started collecting old postcards, and I've got one that was addressed to a Miss Caldwell at Brookfield in West Orton in 1910, which I suspect predates when it actually became a Masonic, when it became the Masonic Lodge.
I could look it up very quickly for you, but I don't know. There's quite a lot of lodges meet at Brookfield at West Horton. I joined a lodge called Coronation Lodge, which is now a bit unusual in Freemasonry. It's called a dining lodge. They don't do ceremonies and joining new members and putting them through degrees to become a Master Mason. They just go and eat a lot and and enjoy themselves. But I'd left before it became a dining lodge. I'm going to ask Alex, do you know when they became a Brookfield opened?
Yeah, well, yes, I do. But Mike, can you give it 4 weeks? Because the next
Yes, certainly.
lecture is about Brookfield Hall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I attended 2 family weddings that were held, receptions were held at the old Brookfield before it burned down. Because one of my uncles was, he was worshipful master at one stage, and both his daughters had their wedding receptions there. And one of them was marrying a guy called Watkinson, and their son is Michael Watkinson, who played cricket for Lancashire and England.
Yeah.
And I've really, I've got, quite vivid memories of those wedding receptions there, and particularly the gardens there. I remember that it had quite a large garden. It was ideal for, if you had a wedding with quite a few children there, they could sort of let off steam out in the garden. And it was quite it's quite a memorable day, even though I was probably about 10 at the time, I would think, something like that.
Well, I think it'd be a memorable place for Alex and Linda, because they had their wedding reception there.
Right.
But are you not telling us when Brookfield was opened, Alex?
I was just going to say that I don't know.
All right.
I don't know exactly. It would have been, well, there's a reference, and this is included in next month's talk, to Elias Ashmole, who was the founder of the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford, paying a visit to West Horton, and undoubtedly he would have visited West Horton Masonic Hall then. But also, there is a little bit of, I think it's called the Brownfield Farm, that was part of another bigger estate. And all this was long before the railway was put in, because Cunningham Clough had to be diverted to allow the railway to come through from Bolton. So it was obviously around before then. So
which is when? What do you know? What year?
1926 it was opened.
Right. Strangely enough, this postcard that I bought, given that I said what I remember really most about Brookfield was the garden. Well, this postcard's being sent by someone to tell Miss Caldwell that he's actually posted a consignment to her of roses and dahlias, which is, given that I remember the garden, it looks as though it was being laid out, you know, as early as 1910.
Yes, I'm sure that's the case. And the gardens actually still look splendid. Really, really nice. Yeah. But the next month's talk will cover all of that.
Right. Okay.
And if he's not done that yet, it will do in 4 weeks' time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. If you want to find out information about Masonic halls, it's quite easy on the internet. You can go onto something which is called Lane's Masonic Records, and if you put the name of the lodge or the number of the lodge, it'll give you the numeric history of which buildings they were in, at what dates and when they were founded, etc. And it's freely available on the internet. And if you want to do research about any particular lodge, there's a site called Masonic Periodicals, and you can just put your search title in. If you wanted to put West Horton Lodge, it would come up, and all the articles that have been in the various Masonic papers or magazines over the last couple of 100 years.
Am I right in thinking there are some Masonic lodges dedicated to people who work in education?
There certainly are specialist lodges. There's Boy Scout lodges, Boys Brigade lodges, Round Table lodges, cyclist lodges, anything you can think of, where teachers lodges, judges lodges, police lodges. Not many police lodges, but if there's people of particular interest, they could get together and form a lodge, and they just need permission off the provincial Grand Master in the area where they're based. So there's all kind of lodges. My lodge I joined was a Seafarers Lodge, and I'd been in the Merchant Navy and in Liverpool, and there was a number of seafarer lodges there. It died a death because the port died a death, and people moved out to Liverpool.
Are police allowed to join the Masons?
Anybody's allowed to join.
Literally anybody. Nobody's banned at all.
Nobody, black, white, green or blue, Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, Hindus, Muslims. You've just got to believe in God, believe in honesty, truth, and charitable causes.
Would you
The
like
only
to tell
person
us?
I know that's been kicked out was Ken Dodd. And he didn't pay his fees. That's one of the other reasons why you can be kicked out. Obviously, if you've got a criminal record, another reason that you can get kicked out, if you try to make monetary gain by trying to canvass favoritism. Often Freemasons said, oh, well, he's got that job or that contract because they're both Freemasons. But that's one of the few things you can get kicked out of Freemasonry for. But I would suggest that anyone who belongs to a golf club or a Rotary club or something, you could be tempted to talk to a friend at your Rotary or the church or the golf club, saying, you do building work, will you do a job for me, or would you do that? So people who know each other might ask things, but certainly in Freemasonry, if you try to say, for instance, I've been given a parking ticket, can you get rid of a parking ticket for me or something? That's something you get kicked out of for doing things like that. They get more bad press than good press, and for a long time they didn't do publicity, and they wouldn't even ask their children to join because they decided they were extremely private, and they waited for children to say, I want to join, and they'd say, whoa, and they'll tell them how you join.
Yeah.
And so it's a private organisation. Anything you want to know about it, you can go to the library and it'll tell you all the rituals they do and everything. There's nothing secret. It's just private. I wouldn't tell you what the ritual is, but I could tell you where you could go and get a book and read about it if you were so interested.
There didn't seem to be many women in the higher posts.
There's quite a lot of women Freemasons in England, and they have their own organisation. They do everything exactly the same. Now, in France, they do actually have a male and female joint together Masonic lodges. But so they have a number of different what they call grand lodges. So in some lodges in France, they have both English as both men and women at the same meeting. But you wouldn't have in England. You can invite women in. I know in the Pendle area where I live, when each year they collect a lot of money for charity, and tends to be the biggest amount of money that tends to go to the hospice, but we give money to things like to battered wives and other different good causes. And at one meeting a couple of years ago, we invited all the recipients to come and be presented with their checks, and it was very heart-wrenching to hear the stories of some of these people on how they were going to use the money. So it's something which the Freemasons don't publicize very well. And it goes back to when the Pope first issued his first bull preventing or saying that Roman Catholics couldn't join. Freemasons have never stopped Roman Catholics joining, and there's quite a lot of Roman Catholics that have joined and are still Freemasons to today. And the reason why the Pope issued the bull was very political. I understand it. I was going to say I probably support it a little bit, but there's no reason why, from a religious point of view, Roman Catholics or anybody of any religion shouldn't be a member. We do nothing wrong. Everything is transparent. And I think it's a jolly good organisation.
Is the organisation expanding or contracting? The reason why I ask that is because a number of churches in West Orton on the verge of closing because of the inability to afford the cost of maintaining the buildings.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you give a thing of churches. I attend church each week, and the congregation is dwindling. Yeah, and Freemasonry is similar. I'd say the average age in some lodges is probably 75. And I'd say the average age when I go to church on a Wednesday morning is probably about 75, with a couple of young people who go to get a tick so that their children can go to the church school. So the Freemasons are mindful that the majority of members are too old and can't be as active as they should be. And they're starting to try and recruit people at university. They've lowered the age of admission from 21 to 18. And I hope that they will survive. They've been going for hundreds and hundreds of years. The modern Grand Lodge was founded in 1717, but there was lodges all over the country before the Great Fire of London. There's records of all the lodges from in Scotland from 1599, when King James ordered his chief clerk of works to do an audit of all Masonic lodges and to tell them that they all had to keep records of members, etc. So there's been records for a long, long time. And there's Masonic charters, which tells you about the rules they should keep and the good order and how they should behave in society, which date back to the 1400s. So it's not a new thing. It's a thing that Freemasons have worked closely with the churches because their main job was building churches and cathedrals, and that's how they've developed.
Thank you.
Eddie, you mentioned France a little while ago.
Yes.
Is Masonry a British institution or an English institution originally, which has spread? And if so, how far has it spread around the world? Is it still headquartered in England, or has it gone somewhere else?
No, there's headquarters. Each geographical area has their own Masonic lodges and their own Grand Master. For the likes of America, they tend to be, each state is a Grand Lodge. Like Pennsylvania will have their own Grand Master. Certainly, like the British Empire, which started spreading around the world from about 1600, Freemasonry went with the army around the world. So there's loads of lodges in India, all the British dependent countries, and there was a lodge in Rome formed by in the 1730s. So the lodges all over Europe, Russia, Cuba, one of Castro's generals was a Freemason. So when he clamped down on lots of things, he didn't clamp down on Freemasonry. So Cuba still has a very active Masonic group. So everywhere in the world, there's virtually Freemasonry.
Except China.
Sure. I was just going to say, I'm not too sure about China, but there certainly is in Hong Kong. There's a big Masonic lodge in Hong Kong, and there's been a Masonic lodge there for several hundred years.
Very good.
But there's not effectively a hierarchy with a headquarters somewhere.
No, they don't all join together with one hierarchy. Like the head of the English Freemasonry, English and Welsh that is the Duke of Kent, which is the cousin of the Queen, and he's a very old man, and they wheel him out for special occasions. But in Scotland, it's quite democratic. Each province in Scotland have a representative that vote for their Grand Master, so they're democratically elected. And it's like that throughout the world, with the exception of England, where they have someone who's a royal as a figurehead, and they have what they call a program master, who is the person that actually runs it on their behalf. So I don't know what will happen when the Duke of Kent dies, but there's been lots of heads of the British English Freemasons who have been kings and princes in the past.
Week is next month. On the 9th of September, the history of Brookfield Hall. That's the 9th. That's our next Zoom meeting, 9th of September.
I once worked with a guy from West Horton, and he was telling me that quite a mining history of all the villages around West Horton. And when the two villages met together underground, when the seam met, they all came up on top and had a fight. And I thought to myself, so a little bit rebellious, the West Horton people, or Alpheners, and they have a habit of burning churches down and Masonic halls. And it'll be interesting to know the history.
I can't think there would be any coal mines sufficiently close together that the seams would meet, to be honest.
Well, they were quite close together, coal mines, you know.
Oh, I know there were seams.
Yeah.
For fractions of a mile underground.
Yeah.
Well, can I thank Eddie very sincerely for such an authoritative account of Freemasonry. I'm sure you've illuminated the subject in all of our minds. Thank you very much. Can we give some applause to Eddie? I don't know whether you could. Well, some of us are muted. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very enlightening.